Well, our guest this week is the Oklahoma State Director of Right on Crime, a group that believes justice reform is not only the right thing to do, but the fiscally conservative thing to do. Joining me now is Right on Crime's Adam Luck. So Adam, why do we incarcerate so many people here in the state?
Yeah, well, first I'll say it's not just Oklahoma, it's all across the United States, but Oklahoma is not unique in the fact that we just have a lot of laws that specifically target nonviolent drug offenses, and we punish those people quite severely when compared to the rest of the United States. So I think when you look at the population in Oklahoma's prison system, a lot of them are nonviolent drug offenders, and that average is significantly higher than most other states in the United States.
Now, we always hear about prison overcrowding, we hear about prison, understaffing for staff too.
Yep.
Let's talk about this from a budget perspective. What has this meant for us?
Well, it's meant that the corrections budget in Oklahoma is one of the fastest growing and most significant budget items in our budget. So in the last couple of years, it's one of the only handful of budget items that has actually increased, where other state agencies have received 5% cut. Our corrections budget has grown significantly in the last 10 years.
Yeah, and that really doesn't even touch on the social costs of incarceration.
Oh, absolutely, especially when you consider, Oklahoma has the highest female per capita incarceration rate in the United States, and the national average for a child whose mother has been incarcerated, they are now 7 times more likely to be incarcerated themselves at some point in their life. So when you consider the impact on our communities and our families, the imperative to do something different just becomes even more significant.
Mm-hmm. Is it fair to say that when it comes to incarceration and when it comes to sentencing, really one size does not fit all?
Absolutely. And I think that's what we've seen across the United States, is that states have said we've got to do something different, and that's going to look different for our state, because each state has different laws. And so I think for Oklahoma, even county by county, there's going to be different things that need to happen, based on the judges and the prosecutors that are there, but also, the problems that particular county faces, for them. So yeah, I think it will be different. It doesn't necessarily have to be one specific policy that's going to solve this issue statewide.
Yeah. Do you differentiate between nonviolent and violent offenders?
Oh, absolutely, absolutely. I think there's, a lot of people will say it this way: there's a group of people that we are afraid of, that need to be in prison. For whatever reason, the crimes that they've committed, they belong there, that we're going to have to keep them in prison. But there's another group of people that we might just be mad at. And I think the question now is, do they need to be in prison? Or are these people better served? Maybe, we're looking at what is the root of their criminal behavior. Are we mad at them for using drugs? Are we mad at them for stealing something? And I think the question now has to be, is putting them in prison the best use of our resources? And if not, what else can we do to better serve them and really get the outcomes that we would expect from our correctional system?
Mm-hmm. From my own experience and having visited several prisons, drug abuse and drug problems is a unifying factor, really across the offenders. They may be in there for a different crime, but there's some type of drug use back there. So what does that tell us when the way we approach drugs here in the state?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I think one thing it tells us is that a lot of times people will turn to crime to feed their addiction. So when we look at somebody, we've got to look at and see, like I said earlier, what are the root causes of their criminal behavior? And in Oklahoma, if somebody's got a substance abuse addiction, if they've got a substance abuse problem, what are the treatment options that we could provide for them that would potentially address those issues, hold them accountable for, something like, for example, like drug court, where we can hold them accountable for going to this treatment and receiving this treatment, and at the end of this, year-long program, they've actually addressed the reasons for their criminal behavior. We've spent less money on them than sending them to prison, and now they're much less likely to recidivate and go back to prison after completing a program like that. So I think to answer your question, we've got to look at what are the alternative options that we could use instead of prison that are actually going to better address the root cause and save us money in the long run.
Mm-hmm. Let's talk a little bit more about recidivism. Does the real work start once someone is paroled?
Well, I think the work starts, day one, as soon as somebody is convicted. The Department of Corrections, the job of corrections starts day one. But I think your question is, what is the work when somebody is released, when somebody gets out of prison? And I think, in Oklahoma, not only do we, incarcerate more people for more crimes for longer periods of time, but the effect of having a felony in Oklahoma is also much more significant. So, for example, losing your driver's license, or not being able to live in publicly subsidized housing, or having a difficult time finding a job. I mean, all those things are what we would call barriers to a successful reentry. And when you look at, the effect of having a felony in Oklahoma, we never really, people who are convicted of a felony in Oklahoma, it's very difficult for them to actually pay off their debt to society. And the idea for most people, they would say, well, when somebody gets out of prison, they've paid their debt to society. They should be able to go back. They should have a second chance. And unfortunately, a lot of times in Oklahoma, that's just not the case. So I think there is significant work that begins when somebody is released from prison, and a lot of that has to do with just being able to find a job, being able to support themselves, having the capacity to pay off the fines and fees that they owe, being able to actually, what we think of as reintegrating back into society. And that is significant work and oftentimes very difficult work in Oklahoma.
Are there any examples where some of these ideas that you're talking about, that they've worked before?
Oh, absolutely. So the organization that I work for is called Right on Crime, and it's an initiative based out of an organization called the Texas Public Policy Foundation. It's the largest state-based think tank in the United States. It's based in Austin, Texas. And this initiative started after 2007 when the Texas Public Policy Foundation really helped the Texas legislature figure out some different policy options that they could pursue in light of some predictions that they received for an increase in their prison system growth over the next 5 years from 2005 to 2010. So they essentially were faced with an option of, look, we either build new prisons to house an estimated 18,000 more inmates in the next 5 years, or we do something different. So the Texas Public Policy Foundation helped them come up with some different policy solutions, and essentially what they did was they invested a significant amount of money. It was at the time about $241 million in one legislative session, and what they did was they developed, like I mentioned earlier, drug courts in every county in Texas. They focused on reentry. They focused on helping people successfully reenter society, which significantly reduces their chances of recidivating. And essentially since then, so since 2007, fast forward to 2015, last year they had the lowest crime rate they've had since 1973. They've closed 3 state prisons. They've closed 8 juvenile facilities. They've cut their juvenile population by 52%. They're estimating that they've avoided and saved about $3 billion since then. So what we've seen is, a conservative state, conservative legislature that's really pursued criminal justice reform in a smart, fiscally conservative way, and really held the government accountable, held the corrections department accountable for the outcomes that we would expect given the amount of money that we're spending in our correction system. So, and there's other examples too. I mean, Texas has kind of been one of the greatest examples of what this could look like. And like I said earlier, the point you touched on, which is that it's going to look different for every state. And that's part of the work we're doing here, is just trying to facilitate the conversation around what this will look like in Oklahoma, and just trying to move this work forward here. So,
I know it certainly sounds like budgetarily wise, this works. What about the emotional side? How do you go convince a lawmaker that we need to get people, some people maybe that are being incarcerated now, out of prison and back on the street, with that lawmaker knowing that there is the possibility some of them will reoffend?
Right. Yeah. It certainly is a difficult argument to make, given how, when you consider how many of us were raised, especially in Oklahoma, looking at it from a perspective of tough on crime. We have a significant portion of our legislature that would ascribe to the Christian faith, as I myself do, and I think part of the work that we're doing is, from the faith perspective, saying, these are the things that you believe, and how does that line up with the way that we treat someone who's wronged our society? Asking the question, are we truly giving them a second chance when they reenter society? And I think that a lot of times communicates very well. I think the point you mentioned earlier, the impact on our society, the impact on our communities, I think is another very strong argument to make. And then lastly, I think, the gravity of our incarceration system in Oklahoma is such that 1 in 12, the estimation is 1 in 12 Oklahomans have either been convicted of a felony or interacted with the prison system in some way. 1 in 12. So the chances are, whoever I'm talking to, they either know somebody or are 1 degree away from somebody who's interacted with the correction system in Oklahoma. And that's just a lot of people. So I think when we, it's easy to look at this issue and say, these are just people who have done something wrong and they deserve it. But when you really break it down, these are our neighbors. These are people that we know, that we love, that we care about. These are our sons and daughters. And I think when you break it down that way and you start to see that, these people are coming back. We release close to 9,000 people from the Oklahoma prison system every year. These people are coming back. And if we really care about our economy, if we really care about our families, if we really care about the direction and the trajectory of our state, what are we doing to make sure that we are going to prosper in the future? What are we doing to make sure that these people actually have a chance to reenter society and be successful after they've made a mistake and paid their debts to society? So I think, those are some of the things that we try and talk about. And I think the larger question is, even if somebody in the legislature says, I agree with you 100% on these things, I think the larger question is, do they have the political capacity to support this? And I think that's what we're really seeing now, is a shift in how politically this issue has been viewed in the past and how it's being viewed now, specifically because of the work that the governor's done in the Justice Reform Committee that they've started, the work that they're starting there. And also we've seen a lot of attention on this issue in Oklahoma County and Tulsa County because of the jails and the overcrowding in the jails. So I think we're starting to see kind of the political language that's surrounded this issue for a long time is starting to shift, and that's encouraging.
Yeah, well, Adam's certainly an issue that could not be more important to our state.
Yeah.
Thank you so much for coming and visit with us.
Absolutely.
Now, if you would like to see other perspectives on justice reform, we do have some of those streaming on our website, including some faith-based initiatives. Just head to our value-added section at okrising.com.
Blessing to know that there's people out there that really care.